All right.
Where do you want me to stand?
I'm going to mute here.
Well, just things are cranking up.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Hello. Sorry to stop all the good conversations that are happening. I know everybody's catching up post NAB, and we have a really good crowd tonight, so I know there's a lot of good catching up going on. But I want to dive in and get a couple housekeeping things out of the way so we can do our pass the mic and then lead into our wonderful presentation by Paul from Studer. But again, first of all, welcome to everybody who's here this evening. Do we have anybody who's here for the first time? I know there's a couple of you. Anybody else? First time in how long? Well, we're pleased to see you, whether it's the first time or the 1,000th time. In any case, we're happy you're here. So I just want to highlight our next meeting will be May 18th. Mark your calendars now. I want to get that out of the way before I forget the date. What else? We have some new member candidates that were emailed all the information they need to get connected and memberized. So if you are waiting on that, check your email boxes again. If you can't find it, get in touch with me and we'll make sure that you get the information you need. Board nominations are still in progress. You should, if you're interested in running for the board for the next term, reach out. I think we have some good candidates who've already stepped up and stepped forward. But if you are interested, this is probably your last chance. Or if you're interested in an officer position, please let us know as well. Absolutely not. Maybe for you, Glenn. This has been a blast, but I need to share the level a little bit. Okay. I don't want to stand up here too long because we have so many great things going on. How many people were able to make it out to NAB this year? Awesome. So everybody, when we do the pass the mic, is going to have something really great to say about what they saw at NAB. Bill Hogan suggested that we do your favorite product at NAB. So you should be thinking about it. We're going to be marching around with the microphone. So be ready. I know for me, my company had me stuck with storage most of the time. So I got to learn all about NVMe storage and all that fun stuff. So that was great. But now we're going to go through the pass the mic. We're going to go table to table. If you have anybody new that you want to introduce at your table that's with us for the first time, or any industry announcements, if you're looking for a job, if you know of a job opening, and again, your favorite NAB product, this is your moment. So coming around here to our first table. Any takers? Oh, I see. We've got Evertz and Studer here represented well. Max?
Okay, I'm a little bit late, so I decided to come for the presentation time. So great NAB. Paul is our new member of Evertz family, and he is very, very established member of Studer family. And I want to recommend him very highly. He is a very excellent engineer and a thinker. And he already come up with a beautiful, beautiful design of the new Studer Vista Bravo Surface.
Nice. Thanks for being here, Max. And Edwin, do you have something? Oh, I got it. Yeah. I know at this table, a couple new faces, Ryan Porter and Tyler Casey from Caffeine. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.
What was your favorite product at NAB?
I ran into this cool guy named Paul. He had this really great stuff to say about these Studer consoles. It was really great how it ties into Magnum so well. Big fan.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Tyler. All right, coming around to our next tape. Oh, sorry. Anybody else? No, no. All right. What's going on at this table? We're eating still. Russ, do you have anything to say?
I don't, not at this time.
I'm seeing lots of people shaking their heads. I see Bill.
I'll get to my thing, but the blast from the past, Al Hart, who came down from North, who is an ex STE president, and I guess you only had two jobs, KCET and Modern Video, right?
Al Malang and RCA video disc.
Yeah, RCA video disc. Yes. How could we ever forget? And Bill Womack, also, who was at around town and worked for Bill or Al for many years, and he's another former president. So, and then some other people. Some other people, yes, who've been here rather recently. So, a comment, not the favorite. Maybe it was my least favorite. Everybody's talking about the cloud, but they don't figure out how much it really costs. The cloud, yes. Well, AWS will tell you it's wonderful. So anyway, where's
40 cents.
oh, Eric disappeared. Okay. Anything else? I guess I'm passing the mic now. You want to say hello, Al?
Hello there. Yeah, actually, I was president in 1991 and Bill was 1994. That's when we used to have 150 people show up for STE. Serious difference there.
Well, it sounds like we have two great candidates for president right here. Ready for another round?
Only if I can do it from Northern California when I'm in Europe or something traveling.
There we go. Well, we're happy both of you are here with us. Thank you for coming. And over here, any new announcements? Any NAB favorites? All right, all right. All right, I know this table has some chatters. Come on. What's any announcements? Any NAB favorites? I think we just need to pass the mic around this whole table.
I'll give you a favorite. So because of the clients that I was with, we looked at a lot of different camera robotics and camera pedestals and such. And Telemetrics has a new wireless pedestal, which looks very promising to have a pedestal that's robotic and not have these massive cables, triacs, what have you, to trip over in your studio. And that's out now. So a nice find. I can't remember the name of it, but you track me down. There's a competitor now to the Wacom tablet too that is an improvement and a better price. So I can hook you up with that. I just can't remember the name of it.
Wasn't able to attend NAB, but I'm glad to attend this session today, specifically for Paul. He helped us commission our Vista One at FanDuel TV. It did take 2 years, not because of him. We had COVID and all these implications, but we're glad to get that finally installed. So I'm glad to see the new product line, and Paul's been great for us. So we also have a Vista 9 at FanDuel TV as well, which has been working great for us for many years.
So my first STE was somewhere around 1998, maybe. And I would like to say that at that STE meeting was J. Ray Mitchell, Bob Bajorek, Bill Womack, and who's that old guy next to you, Bill? I mean, this was a long freaking time ago. So they used to make a joke about what is the average age of the people at STE. And what was the joke, Bob, you remember? Halfway between retired and dead. Al Hart, you made my night tonight showing up. I'm so happy to see you. Well, I'm just surprised you're still alive. No, really. I'm so happy to see you. Thank you. Anyway, this is a long-standing organization. You bring in the young people like Laura and Eric in this, and they're going to be telling these stories about me and Jeff. What is it? K-Long Jeff. Yeah. And they're going to be telling these stories about us. But I have to admit, I have no tie to this situation, to this company or whatever else. But my friends at Keycode Media are having an event, a post-NAB event next week. And early on, they're like, you better sign up because we're going to sell out. And now they're really trying to push the event, which selling me they're not selling out. But anybody who wants to go to the Keycode event next Wednesday, there you go. I got no ties. They didn't even invite any of the manufacturers I represent, but I'll do that for Diversified when they have their thing too next week, by the way. And thank you very much. But Al, you made my night.
Thanks, Glenn. Excuse me. All right. All right. Moving down the line. How's this table feeling? Boyd, any fun announcements?
I don't know, not a one.
When do you start your presidential campaign?
The 12th of never.
How about any other announcements from this table? Any highlights from NAB that anybody wants to mention? No? Okay. All right. Oh,
ST lost all of its history. Let me tell one story that STE used to give awards, believe it or not. And many, many years ago, when television transmitters were manned before they were remote control, ABC transmitter, the guy that would, one of the guys and the head transmitter engineer was a guy named John Stagnaro. John Stagnaro was a wonderful Italian gentleman, about this tall, big John Stagnaro. And up at the transmitter one day, they had to do, I think they did 24 on and so much off, however. But he was in the shower and he was the only guy manning the transmitter, and the phone rang. And so John had to hustle out of the shower, and he runs over to get to the phone, and it was above the workbench. And so John reached for the phone, and as he reached for the phone, his manhood dangled into a drawer, and the drawer shut. Now, they say that the scream is still echoing on Mount Wilson, but the Society of Television Engineers, being the gentlemen we were, issued John the Purple Dong Award.
oh my goodness. It'll probably be a while before that one's topped. All right. All right. Well, again, thank you all for being here and sharing everything tonight. I think we're gonna jump right in to Mr. Paul Shorter from Studer. If you didn't get a chance to read his resume on the invite, do so. He has a illustrious career over 30 years and Emmy winning.
Yeah, as it turns out. Still not quite sure how that happened, but it did.
But I don't think there's no way you've worked with the Studer project in the last decade or more without knowing who Paul is. So Paul, thank you for being here with us
Thank
and
you.
letting us convince you to come the week after NAB.
Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I'm going to sort of kick off with a little video, but I heard there's a bit of problem with getting audio to work, so which is a bit ironic. But so I'm going to take this off and see if I can actually get this to work. So bear with me a sec. Actually, it's going out over the HDMI, but I think you can just about hear it in the background. Oh, is it on the projector? There you go. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of nostalgia. There's most of us can remember a lot of those things that were actually on the screen then. So anyway, as Eric has already said, my name's Paul Shorter. It's nice to meet everybody. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. But I've been around in the industry for 30 odd years, which makes me feel real old. I keep calling myself at Evertz the veteran newbie, mainly because I'm new to Evertz, but I'm definitely not new to the industry. So yeah, Studer is 75 years old this year, and it's had quite a time as years have gone by. So I'm going to sort of really go into sort of what's going on sort of now and more recent. So I know this came up many, many times at NAB. Why is Evertz and Studer now under the same umbrella? Well, let's start with the acquisition. So Evertz acquired Studer, the IP and the assets back in February 2021. And the first task we had on our hands, and bearing in mind this is coming out of COVID. So at that point, the intention was for us to relocate the manufacturing out of Europe, bring it across the Atlantic to a different continent, push it up into Canada, and we were going to do 3 months with the Evertz guys at Harman and 3 months of the Harman guys coming to Evertz. But COVID put pay to that, so we weren't in the position to be able to do it, unfortunately. So most of that was all done over Zoom calls, email, and just sheer hard work. The production people did an amazing job because basically after relocating the factory, which took that 6 months or so, another 4 or 5 months later, we actually rolled the first Vista X off of the production floor out of Burlington in Canada. That was one of the sort of milestones that I will not forget. That was a pretty monumentous task as far as I was concerned. So the next thing was then to look at development and engineering. Under Harman, we had a bit of a lull, about 4 years of it, where there was really no engineering support. So for me, moving into the role that I'm in now, really did mean I had to get my finger out and get my nose to the grindstone and all those other little nice sayings you can say, but it really was, we had to get there and see what we could do to actually make the engineering side of things work. This was not an easy task. We basically brought virtually no development team at all across. In fact, I will go ahead and actually say there was 9 Studer-centric people that came out of Harman that are now part of Evertz. Out of the 40-odd thousand Harman employees, there was only 9 of us that came across. And so that 9 people had a lot of work to do. And one of the things that we really want to do was rebuild an iconic brand such as Studer. And we knew that wasn't going to be easy. For me, one of the most welcoming parts of all of this was the fact we had a very strong management team that was supportive of what we were trying to do. So Evertz had their own plans for Studer, and we helped modify those plans. It's probably the best way to put it. So things didn't go in exactly the direction that everybody thought initially, but I think we're on the right path now. And after that sort of initial, that inertia, if you like, at the beginning, it really did start to re-energize the brand and the people around it. both our customers as well as us internally. So let's move on a little bit. So I'm going to really sort of just show you quickly here, and I really don't want this to be a salesy type thing. I'm just trying to give you an overview. But this is our lineup now, starting up on the top right-hand side with the Vista X, which is the big flagship console, down to the little Micro Series console in the bottom left-hand corner. And I know David, they have both the Micro Series and the predecessor to the Vista X. So they've got the two extremes at FanDuel. So again, as I said, I don't want this to be a salesy thing, but I thought it was important just to give you a quick overview on the Vista V and Vista X. And the main reason being is that these two consoles rely on an external DSP processing engine. And one of the first things we did as being part of the Evertz clan was to come up with a new core. So we'd had the Infinity core since about 2014. This is a x86 Intel chip type device, better known as the computer. And basically, it gives us what we need. Okay, we do. So the main thing with this one was that we knew we were missing a major element in today's market, and that was the 2110 interface. And by having the new COTS card that we've used in this core, we've actually been fortunate not only to make this a native 2110 core, but we've managed to retain our original A-Link interface as well. So anybody who has baseband type infrastructure and already has Studer, they can still use their original A-Link interface to their IO frames. But if someone's doing an upgrade or a greenfield, we can go to the 2110 network. This is all, as I say, it all takes in on board the original Infinity core momentum, but by adding this new COTS card with the new IO, it gives us a new lease of life, if you like. It takes us into today's world. We've managed to do things like retain our configurable DSP, our 100% redundancy, that's still available on this core. The other thing that's really nice is that the server base that we've used is actually the same as the rest of the Evertz live media nodes. So it's shared across all of the product range that use this type of core. So that's sort of what we did last year, okay? So what have we been up to? So I've brought this slide into play mainly because I want to explain a little bit about the Evertz View system. So Evertz View is an operational user interface, okay? And it's primarily based around a touch panel. However, it does have the capabilities of tactile options as well. And I was in discussion with Russ, I believe, earlier about tactile controls. And one of the things that's important here is that we can still use buttons or faders or knobs to actually do what we want to do, as well as the intuitive touchscreen. So looking at that, going a bit further, we started looking at how we could integrate this into the Studer world. And there's a significant difference between most of the things we do in View currently and what we need to do with Studer. And the big one there is bidirectional control. Okay, so the idea here is when we move a fader on the touchscreen or on the tactile device that's in the View location, it controls the fader on the console and vice versa. So the other thing we wanted to do was increase the control capabilities. So we showed the original Vista in View last year at IBC. We had about 140 control points from the console to the View system. At NAB, we increased that to over 2,000. And if you saw on the previous slide, I said 2,000 plus. And the reason for that is I can't remember how high we got up. I think it's around about 2,400, but can't be 100% certain on that. But that's a significant change in the 6 months or so between IBC and NAB. So the team have been working really hard to get us into that position. For me, one of the things that needed to be paramount in this was anybody that knows the Vista console knows that the Vistonics. So the Vistonics is basically a collection of rotary controls, buttons, and touchscreens. And one of the important things about it is that where you look is where you touch, is where you control. So you're not looking over here when you're controlling something over there while you're still watching the TV screen. So this is all in front of you. And that's one of the things that's really kept the Vista in the forefront of people's minds when it comes to intuitive surfaces and intuitive consoles. So I wanted to make sure when we went into the View platform, we could do the same thing. And what we've done, I think is quite incredible. We've actually taken a touch screen, and because rotary controls are always very difficult to manage on a touch screen, we went to sliders. But not only did we go to sliders, but if you can see these little colored dots around here, we can actually touch on one of those points on the graph, move your finger around, and the controls will follow you. You would change the frequency, you would change the cut and boost. And the next step is to actually use the 2 or 3 finger mechanism where you move your fingers like this, and you'll actually change the cue size, whether you make it larger or smaller. All the while this is happening on the View screen, it's actually making the changes visibly on the console screen as well. So you can actually see that on the Vistonics above. So that was a really, really key point for me. And the team have actually amazed me in the way they've actually managed to pull this together. So here's a quick little video, no audio this time. And you can see how I've got the faders moving there on the touch screen and moving back on the console. And the response between the two is very, very key and very, very close. So the next step was, where do we push this? How do we sort of take this out, and where does it go in the big wide world? So View works very well as an individual controller of the console. Okay, that's a given. That's just going to happen. But where it really becomes important is the fact we can actually add multiple View stations to one console. And in that, we can even get to the point where we can hide those controls away from the engineer that sits at the console, and he can still use the console as he would do for any normal mixing. And these other mixes can happen behind the scenes. That's if you want to do it that way. You may want to be in a situation where you're doing a multilingual type of production. So you need the ability to do maybe a Spanish version, and you want your PFL just to be able to sample the Spanish side of things, as well as having the English dialogue. So in those instances, you can then set this up to do the various stations where you want them to be. So you can either work as an independent station, or you can make it as part of the bigger console. So that's something we needed to do. In addition to that, it starts pushing us out into being able to do better remote productions. Okay, so now we can actually have these View stations on the end of a bit of internet string, if that's how you want to put it. We've got the ability with other product lines, such as the XPS and the Scorpion lines, of actually being able to audition the audio and actually listen to what's happening. So that's an important point. And as I go further through, you'll see where I'm going with this. The whole thing is tied in through Magnum OS. Okay, so Magnum OS is Evertz's control system, and that Magnum OS server sits wherever it needs to, and the console will connect to that. The View stations will then connect back into that. And that's quite a key factor here. We have so much power in the Magnum OS that it actually made the integration of Studer into the View station much simpler than what I anticipated. So let's move on. So this, you heard a little bit about this, the Vista Bravo. We introduced this new for the show, but new for NAB. And it's the first time we've actually had such a small console based on the Vista. It's 12 faders. The 10 that you can see slightly to the left, you can actually get to 120 fader strips in no more than 2 button presses, which is pretty incredible, especially when you think you've got 140 mono paths that this little beast can do as well. So we feel that this is actually a class leader in both its power and processing, as well as its usability. It has all the standard sort of features of a Vista. You get your Vistonic screen, you get all your busing, your mix minuses, et cetera, and so on. The I/O is pretty flexible, but base comes with 16 in, 16 out, 64 MADI, and we can add our D21 modular cards as well to this. So you could add maybe a Dante card, or you could add another a quad MADI, sorry, a dual MADI, and have 2 more stage boxes to expand what you've actually got on this. So, and of course, the 2110 side, we didn't want to forget that. So by coupling it with some of the EMR range products that Evertz have on the market, we can actually go 2110 as a gateway. So moving on. So why did we call it Vista Bravo when there's already a Bravo product in the Evertz range? It's very simple. The Bravo system, which you can see sort of on the left there, which is a collection of software-related products around the similar hardware, okay? And you can set this up to be a control room. You can set it to be a record replay. You can use it for VAR. So for instance, when the referees decide that they're not sure whether the particular ball was out or whether there was a foul happen, they can go and quickly look at the record and the replay of whatever's happened. They can do it themselves, so they don't have to get anybody with special talents. And the whole idea of that is that these view screens can be set up just to do what they want to do. So taking that whole Bravo situation into play. It's a suite of tools. That's probably the best way. The one thing that was lacking was the audio side. And this sort of goes back to why Evertz wanted a company like Studer to be their audio forerunner, if you like. It wanted to be in the foreground. So the first thing we did last year was we started looking at the processing within the software of the Infinity Core. And we pulled out basically the EQ algorithms and plugins. We pulled out the dynamics, so the compressors, expanders, etc., and a thing called Vistamix. And for those that don't know what Vistamix is, it's basically an auto mixer. Now, vMix is not there and not designed to replace an A1. It's there to make you mix like a rock star. That's how I tell everybody. So we keep all our ones nice and quiet and calm. But basically, it is important. It's a very, very simple auto mixing device that is basically enhances the way you mix. And so we put that into the original Bravo audio engine. Okay. However, the feedback we got was, this is great, but it's still not powerful enough. It still doesn't do everything we want. We want to do 10 mix minuses. We want to be able to do aux feeds. We want to be able to do this. We want to be able to do that. All the things Vista can already do. So the advantage of having small baby Vista means that we can actually control it under the view side of things, embed the view directly into the Bravo suite, and now you have a full production mixer that sits on-prem, and you can, if you need to, take the mixing element of the faders and actually control those from wherever you happen to be doing your production. So in some respects, you could say we have audio in the cloud. I like to refer to it slightly differently, and I'll come to that in a minute. But basically, that was the whole idea of Vista Bravo. Okay, something compact and powerful that can literally be controlled and be integrated into the view system, or through the view system into the Bravo suite, hence the name. So moving on. Okay, this one's going to have you. Video PFL. I can see by some faces, what on earth is video PFL? Okay, so audio PFL, for those that aren't audiophiles, is basically your ability to listen and audition just a particular channel or a particular strip. Okay, so pre-fade listen is what the PFL stands for. Video PFL is really just a simple case of video following audio. I know that's rare, I know it's unusual, but we want to break the mold. And by doing this, that we've managed to do it. So what happens is you press the PFL button on the console, and it is associated not only with the audio now, but with the video channel that is part of that audio source. So this could be something simple like you want to focus in on a host before they actually go live on the camera. So you can actually make sure their mic's working, make sure there's no crackles and pops, and actually see them mouth moving at the same time as hearing them. It could be something where a camera is maybe off stage and you're actually got a stage manager or somebody like that you need to have visual contact with. You can use a channel on the console then to be able to communicate back to that person, because the console also has a talkback line that goes out to any direct output. So you could actually feed that directly into the ear of that person at the side of the stage. But this way, the A1 has complete communication visually and audibly with whoever they need to. So video PFL is sort of something we've brought about. It was an interesting thing at NAB. I had people look at me as if I was insane. And then I had other people that were about to give me a hug because it was something they'd been looking for such a long time. So, yeah, it was a weird vibe, but it was what it was. I also want to just mention the micro series. The micro series I've brought up here because, and under this section of what we're doing, is basically the micro was sort of shelved by Harman. There were some issues with it, and they didn't want to invest any engineering time in it. But once it became part of Evertz, we took a look at this and said, we need something at the bottom end. We need something in the smaller end of the market. And so this was our solution. The engineering team took a look at it, worked out what was wrong, and within 2 months, it hit the market again. So this is basically an ultra compact fanless 3U unit with all the DSP and the IO built in. It has 4 of the real Studer mic pre's. They're not cheap and cheerful alternatives. They're what we use on the Vista One and on the compact stage box and now in the Vista Bravo. But the clever thing is this all runs off of an HTML5 browser. So it's completely system agnostic. It doesn't care whether it's a Mac, a PC, an iPad, or a Samsung tablet. In addition to that, there are tactile faders. So again, the people that want to fill the faders, there is a fader pack that can be offered with this. Okay, the big question. On-prem or in cloud production? And is it the same as local and remote? In my opinion, no, but in others, it is. So let's just sort of take a quick look at on-prem or local. It's traditional production. We've all been there. We all know it. The variables are known pretty much. It's much easier to support because you can see what's going on. If there's an issue, you can walk up to it, you can look at it, you can deal with it. Latency was never really an issue during on-prem type productions. And where it was negligible and we could manage it. It was easy to manage. You could dial in a small delay line into the video stream, or you could put a delay line in the audio, whatever you needed to do. And that was it. You'd almost set and forget. So then we look at cloud and remotes. So we all know COVID taught us one big thing, and that is that we had to think outside the box when it comes to production. So we had to come up with new methods. Some were easy, some not so easy. Latency became a major problem. It was often quite high. Sometimes we had no idea what it would be. And even when we did find out what it needed to be, it would change. You'd get things that something would refresh and suddenly all your delays and latencies were all over the show again. And so you had to realign everything. One of the things we do know from an audio perspective, it's much easier to do lower channel counts and bus counts in the cloud. When you start expanding it into large data pools of audio data, it becomes much more difficult to handle. And of course, from a support point of view, anyone that's in the maintenance side of life, it became a nightmare because now you were relying on the host or the guest that was saying, my mic doesn't work. And you're like, but I can hear you, so I know your mic's working. And they still insisted, no, it doesn't work. And you'd have to go round and realize that they'd got something keyed wrong, so they weren't hearing it back properly. And it was nothing to do with the mic in the first place. It was the fact their headphones weren't plugged in. And, so that, as I said, that became a major challenge from that point of view. So in reality, what is the cloud? You talk to Amazon, you talk to Google, you talk to Microsoft, and they're all going to tell you it's a data center. Everything is in this nice big server room, and everything's easy, and there's hundreds of these servers, and that's the cloud. But in reality, you've also got private network. You've got dark fiber, you've got lit fiber, and by lit fiber, I mean You have fiber that already has a protocol sitting on it that you basically hop on and transfer your data in their protocol. And let's face it, in reality, what is in the data center is a server. And that doesn't necessarily meet our requirements, especially in audio. In audio, we've got things like, in our case, the Core-Link card. That's an FPGA card that sits on there. You've got graphics accelerators that need to be in there for certain video packages. They aren't always available in these big data centers. So one of the things we need to be clear on is, what are we really looking for here? Are we looking for something that's just basically a big computer that you just chuck a bit of software on and you get back whatever you need? Or are you looking for something more refined that needs to be specific for your type of environment? Redundancy is another issue. You know, they say, oh, we've got plenty, you know, we've got hundreds of servers here. When this one doesn't work, we just plug it into that one and away you go. But there's a lot more to it, especially if you do happen to need an add-on card. You know, you've got to find another server that's available to actually connect to use that add-on card. I've had lots of conversations in the last 18 months with the likes of Amazon, with AWS, on what they would do for us. And they've even got to the point of telling me, hey, we'll put a bare metal server in there and it'll be dedicated for this type of product. But you try doing that in reality thousands of times around the country, so everybody that wants a Studus instance of a server is actually going to get what they want. It's a very difficult path to follow. It's a very difficult path to go down. So what does Evertz offer today? So what we have already, as I explained, was that we have the Bravo system that has an integrated engine for audio, and that can sit in the cloud. It's set up in such a way that you can pass audio to wherever you are, and you can listen to it. The reality is you're restricted on the number of channels you can listen to at any one time. We have the Micro that in theory could be sitting on-prem. It could feed through the Dante network, audio out that way, and it can be controlled through pretty much any internet connection. I've been doing some experiments recently, in fact, just before NAB, because I had a client that was on that wanted to know some specifics. Wanted to know specifics on latency latency And so we have a product called XPS, which is a transport system. We also have the same modules in the Scorpion system that enables us to basically combine both audio, video, and control and send it to somewhere across a network. And that network could be thousands of miles away. I specifically tried it with just public internet and was pleasantly surprised at how low we managed to get the latency. I think I was under 300 milliseconds on public internet between effectively the office and my home. So I was actually controlling the console in the office from home and listening to what I was actually mixing at the same time. Was it ideal? No, it wasn't, but it was doable. The other thing to think of as well is that that was on public internet. So I know for a fact from what the guys have told me, the engineering team that's behind the XPS, if you actually use a private pipe of some description, that latency could drop well below 100 milliseconds. And again, that then becomes more of a more doable for mixing. We can do up to 32 channels, I believe it is, across that path. So most of the time, you're only going to want to do monitoring because you're going to have your core and your IO in the facility, and you're going to have the A1 sitting somewhere else. You know, he could be at home. We could be paying him to sit at home and mix. Just think of that. Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe not. But yeah, so that's basically some of the stuff we're already doing where cloud is concerned. Where are we going next? What's in the future? Well, that's an even bigger question than the last few I've just answered and talked about. Are we looking at proper mixing consoles in the cloud? Absolutely we are. Are we there yet? No. I do know there was an SVG summit in the UK where one of our competitors basically stood up. He was the speaker on the stage from SSL. And his comment then was, do you want to mix in the cloud? And everybody said yes. His response was, do you want latency? And they said no. He said, well, forget it then. He said, if you want to mix in the cloud, you've got to have some form of latency. It's just a given. It's something that we are going to have to just somehow get over and deal with. As time moves on, there's going to be new codecs and things turn up that will make things quicker and make things easier. But at this time, in my opinion, and it's my opinion really, not anybody else's, we're just not quite there yet. There's so many obstacles to overcome to actually make it a really viable option, just to be able to throw a server up somewhere and do 500 channels. And if you think about it, that's typically what a Vista console can do on-prem. When it's actually in a facility, we're looking at mixing up to 500 and odd mono channels and buses. And if you start to deal with 5.1, then we start going up into the core that we released as the 1100. That's a lot of audio processing. And I know it doesn't take up as much bandwidth as video, but you've got lots of little packets that all have to be completely time aligned to make it work. And if you don't have that, then it just goes out the window. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I've sort of answered any of the queries and things that some of you may have had, and probably the biggest one is, why is Studer now part of Evertz? But that's how it is, and that's how it's going to be, and I'm absolutely over the moon that it has happened, because it's really given us a chance to move forward and to pick up an iconic brand that will now go beyond 75 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was fantastic. Yeah, really great. Do we have any questions for Paul about Evertz or mixing in the cloud, or anything else that he can speak on from his experience?
We have one over there. I was going to come back. I was going to come back with a sarcastic answer, but I won't.
Like, how do you put a camera on a cloud?
This is it. It's all down to codecs. You bring a microphone in the case of audio, you bring it into an IO frame, and it's how that IO frame spits it back out. 2110 you still can't do over an open internet. It has to be put into some form of codec and some form of compression. The whole idea of 2110-30 was that there was no compression, but you can't do that when you start talking about sending it over thousands of miles. That's fine. I gave you a serious answer.
Actually, I'm so old, I actually wonder, how do you guys do and think about how the processing works and how it sounds? I remember way back when there were IIR filters and FIR filters, and it was a real pain in the ass, and all the digital consoles were IIR.
Yeah.
What are they today? What is this?
If I'm honest, I can't tell you, because I wasn't one of the original design engineers, so I don't know the specifics. What I do know is that the original Swiss team that designed the Infinity Core, there was a bunch of musicians amongst them. And so for them, whatever they developed had to sound musically correct. And it was quite interesting when I went to Regensdorf in Switzerland, which is where most of the engineering was done. You'd find musical instruments, guitars and things sitting up on top of people's overhead, cabinets and things like that, because they would literally sit down and jam something when they were testing what they were doing. Now, I've been around a long time. I started life with AMS Neve in this industry. And back then, I was more of an educator than a service engineer. That's the only way, looking back, as how I was. There were so many things that people just didn't understand about digital audio. One of the big things I do know even today is that a lot of it revolves around the quality of the mic pre. If the quality of mic pre is not good, and I won't mention any brands, but there's a few of them, then the rest of the audio through the system sounds as bad. It's as simple as that. One of the things that Studer did was they took a lot of their knowledge from the analog days. They did analog mixing consoles as well as tape machines back in the day. and they knew what they had as a Studer sound, and they tried to actually build algorithms to replicate that. And that's really what's actually now inside the Infinity Core. And I actually did have, and this is an honest truth answer. This is not a sales pitcher in any way, shape or form. I always thought the original core, the one predecessor to the Infinity Core, was the S Core, sounded good. But I've had a lot of customers that have upgraded from the S Core and gone to the Infinity Core and said they noticed there's a difference. It sounds just a little bit warmer. There's a little bit more clarity. And that comes down to things like bitrate. You know, the S Core was 40-bit floating point. This goes up to 64-bit floating point. And that floating point makes a huge difference over fixed point calculations. So that's really what I can tell you. In terms of what filtering they use, I don't know. I can't remember.
It's got warmth and sheen.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
You said at this point, you don't think the cloud is ready for prime time, I guess. I don't know, quite ready.
I wouldn't say not ready for prime time. What I would say is that there's a lot of things we need to consider before just jumping into the cloud.
Okay. Well, let's put it this way. If you think that going to the cloud is inevitable, why?
Wow. Really good question. I'm not sure I got a really good answer. Let's think about this. So I think the biggest thing is flexibility. And again, as I mentioned, COVID has sort of taught us a lot of things. You know, a lot of people can work from home. They don't necessarily need to be in the office. With it comes other nightmares, support being one of them. Infrastructure is another one. You now need engineers that understand more on the IT side than they necessarily do on the audio or video side. But at the end of the day, there's going to be progression of some description to make it happen. And so from my perspective, I don't want to be left behind. I've been there once. We don't want to repeat that. You know, we had 4 years of no engineering. So I've got to still push that forward. If that's what our clientele want, we've got to find a way. As I said, I don't necessarily agree with all of it because there are certain things that I think can deteriorate the video quality, deteriorate the sound quality by doing it. But if that's what people accept, you know, the easiest thing I can say is vinyl, CD, and MP3. Those three on their own can give you an idea of how quality can change and people accept it or find other ways to listen to it. You know, I worked at Harman for years, and one of the things the JBL guys did was basically tune their speakers to be able to play MP3 players and make them sound better than what they really were. As mad as that might seem, that's what they did. So we now use MP3 or other forms of file format that have a lot of compression in there, but we sort of ignore it because we've found a way around it. We've found what sounds to our ears do the same. I can tell you a little story. My eldest daughter, she's a Fleetwood Mac fan. She sort of gets that from her dad. I'll take responsibility for that one. But she was driving around listening to it on her phone in the car for years. And one day the phone jack went wrong and she come in and she's like, I've got to go on a road trip and blah, 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 and starts raiding my CD collection. And one of the things she takes out is all my Fleetwood Mac albums. She comes home a week later from a road trip going, Dad, it sounds so much better. Why is that? And I was like, it's because you're listening to crap on the end of on your phone. And so she was, from then on, I never got my CDs back. They're still in her car somewhere. She still has a player, a car that still has a player in it. And so she still uses my CDs. So that's an example I can give of progression, but it's not necessarily good, but it's progression. So hopefully that gave you an answer. Yes.
For when you're looking at designing the cloud-based consoles, what codecs are you looking at supporting for bringing audio in, apart from Evertz and stuff, of course?
At the moment, it's a bit early to say. There are various codecs that we've got to consider, but nothing is concrete yet. So it really is too early to actually say which ones we'll use. But you know, things like Wrist has been one of those that we've been using on the other products. And so I assume we'll continue to use that. There's a few others which I can't recall off the top of my head. But those codecs, and as I said, there's new codecs being developed. So we'll have to look at those as they come on board. But yeah, when it comes to physically getting things on and off as an on-ramp and an off-ramp from the cloud, we have to play ball with whatever codecs are there and make the most of them. So. So ironically enough, we still use 48K for the most part. And the reason being is because I believe our sound quality is that good at 48K, we don't really need to go up in sample rate. However, we can do 96, and we have a number of consoles in classical studios where philharmonic orchestras and such like are performing and recording. And in those cases, they want to be at 96. We've never had, mainly because we deal so much with broadcast, we've never really had a major requirement to go to 192. I can remember having a very in-depth conversation, which was very one-sided on the guy that called me, that basically told me our console was crap if it didn't do 192. And I said, have you actually listened to it? And he said, no. I said, so how can you call that? And he said, because it's not doing 192. And I said, okay, yeah. And so the conversation went on for about 20 minutes, just literally him telling me that we had to do 192. But there's been situations, you know, we use Vista, for instance, a lot in house of worship type of places. And the main reason being is that the console's so configurable, it'll work as a front of house console, it'll work as a broadcast console, as well as a monitor console. And the guys can then just jump from one to the other. They don't need to be retrained to use a different console. But my point here is that we had one church in Texas that insisted on being 96K. And so we got there and we set everything up, and then they started complaining that they didn't realize they were going to lose half of their processing power because you double the sample rate, the processing power is halved. And so they started to moan about this. And I took them to lunch and we were sitting there eating a burger. And I said, why are you guys insistent on 96K? And they all looked at me and said, because it sounds better. I said, how many of your congregation on a Sunday are actually going to sit there and say, this is running 96K, my church service is so much better? And they all looked at me and said, we hadn't thought of it like that. And I said, if you were in a recording studio, I said, running 96K, I can understand it. But you're in a huge, great room with people sniffling and moving around and just making all sorts of random background noise. The difference between 48K and 96K is make no difference to you whatsoever. And so we went back after lunch and we set everything to from 96 back to 48. Suddenly they were happy because they got all their processing back. And the audio sounded just as good in in their worship center. As I said, it was a huge auditorium. And just the atmosphere in the auditorium was enough to take that edge off of what 96K gave them. So that's the answer to that question, is that we could ask for more money or them. Oh yeah, they wanted, yeah, I did notice that when we were there on the Sunday service that the little pouch that went down was like 3 times the size. So, but then the church don't pay any taxes, so they have plenty of money to pay for it anyway. So.
Cool. Any last questions? Yeah, Max.
Just want to add some color to the cloud and audio and video in the cloud. In my opinion, that's my opinion to Max Popov, Evertz guy. There's a difference between the cloud and a data house. I see that a lot of live production is going to be moving towards the data center, data house type of environment where you have a dedicated hardware. It could be a COT hardware, but specifically designed for that, being positioned and available to remote galleries all over the country, all over the world. For the other things like play out, the cloud is perfect. Evertz has, like Discovery for the last 7 years, I think, has had 250 channels on the air using the Amazon cloud. However, if you need to do the live production and the importance of the latency is great, yes, there is another way of doing business than OB bands. You have a data house, that's where you have your stationed all your COTS on no COTS hardware. That's what the Bravo studio is going to be. That's where the studio is going to be together with the Bravo. And you're going to run the production with remote galleries, the operators working the daters, working the different surfaces. To do the cloud production using Azure, AWS, Google Cloud is going to take some time. They have to improve their infrastructure. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Max. All right. Any closing thoughts? All right. Let's give one more round of applause for Paul. And Paul, if people want to reach out to you afterward for more information, how can they reach you? What's the best?
So the best thing to do is either contact me by email, and it's basically my first initial, my last name at evertz.com. I do have some cards here if anyone really wants to talk to me again. But yeah, I've got my cards here if you want to. So either way around, either through the email, or if you need to, just call into the main office, go on the evertz.com, and they'll be able to pass you over to me and give you my contact details. So
perfect. All right. Thank you, Paul. Oh.
Demo area 8 minutes away from here.
Yeah, in Burbank. That's for those that you were here really early, you would have seen my background on my laptop, and that's basically our demo room. So
awesome. Well, again, thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Again, our next meeting is May 18th. Expect an email shortly with info on what that presentation will be, with registration links and all that fun stuff. You can check out all the rest of that stuff on our website at ste-ca.org. And we'll see you all next time. Have a good night, everybody.
Jeff, are you gonna sponsor me?